Hi, I'm Bregan Jane.
I am John Shaloni with Tom Stringer Design Partners.
I'm Roz Murphy with Roz Murphy Design out of Dallas, Texas.
Hi, I'm Christine Vroom with Christine Vroom Interiors, and you're listening to Convo by Design.
Convo by Design.
Convo by Design.
I'm Josh Cooperman, and this is Convo by Design, and today I'm just having a chat with a friend. One that I want to share with you because my friend Charles is one of the best brand ambassadors in the business I know. He's a marketer and promoter in the very best sense of the words. This is Charles Miller. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you already know my background. I wanted to share a story, though, that I don't think I've shared on Convo by Design before. Growing up in LA, I was a huge fan of radio since I can remember. That's how I wound up in broadcast for the first 20 plus years of my career. When I was in college, I was interning at KLOS, a legendary radio station in Los Angeles. My internship was with the Mark and Brian Show, one of the biggest radio shows in LA history. One day, my job, which changed from day to day, my job was to escort and assist a very young and newly minted boxing champ named Mike Tyson around the station for the day when he came in with his promoter, Don King, to plant a tree for Arbor Day. So it was a morning show, and we did bits, and this was a bit. It was Arbor Day, and Mike Tyson and Don King were coming in, and it was like, hey, let's have them plant a tree for Arbor Day. It was stupid, yes, but it got fun. I handed Mike and Don King the shovel, and they looked at each other and just laughed and watched me while I planted the tree. I got a chance, though, when they were in studio being interviewed. I got to follow King and Tyson around all morning, and I watched in awe as Don King did his Don King thing. One of the best promoters I have ever witnessed in my life. Singular in focus at the moment. He had nothing else in his life at that moment but Mike Tyson. He espoused the virtues, sidestepped the unimportant, and made sure to drive every campaign with purpose and passion. That was a long time ago, and I remember it today like it was yesterday. This is, I think I've told Charles this story, but this is how I think about my friend Charles Miller. For those in Southern California design and architecture, you know Charles. He is a fixture at every event. He's there. He's as creative as any designer or artistic as any artist, but his creativity takes the form of ideas that drive brand awareness and engagement for his branded clients. It is most certainly an art form, one for which I have a very strong admiration, and Charles is one of the best. And if you know him, you know I'm right. If you don't know him, allow me to introduce you, and you'll see what I mean. And we're going to get to my conversation with Charles Miller right after this. I am incredibly proud of Convo by Design in year 10, and I'm equally proud of my partnership with Thermosol. They've been presenting partners of Convo by Design for 3 years now, and there is a certain amount of pride that comes with saying that the show is presented by the company that is the best in the world at what they do. Thermosol engineers the most exceptional smart shower products and steam shower systems worldwide for a few reasons. They were the first company to design, patent the technology here in the U.S. dating back to 1958. Thermosol, a U.S. brand, a U.S. manufacturer in Round Rock, Texas, employs an engineering team that designs, tests, and continuously refines the product. Their quality control team tests every single steam generator before it departs the factory. Who else does that? Nobody. I have had the pleasure of working with some world-class designers and architects who tell me, and you probably know this, that the idea of luxury has changed and continues to change, especially when clients want a spa-like bathroom. Steam is mandatory, or it's just not considered a luxury space. And if you want to add steam, you have one true option, It's Thermosol. And now, Thermosol, the industry leader in steam, bath equipment, and technology since 1958, is enhancing their already stellar family of products with new indoor and outdoor luxury saunas. Available in 3 design configurations, each sauna is handcrafted from clear Western red cedar or Nordic spruce, inspired by the brilliance of Northern European sauna technology and design. A luxury bathroom isn't luxury without steam. If you want luxury, you have one option. It's Thermosol. Check them out at thermosol.com and at Thermosol on the socials. You know, before I hit the little red button, you and I are talking a little bit, as I always love to do, and so many things kind of come out of those conversations before I hit record. And one of the places I wanted to start with you, for those who don't know you, you know, in Southern California and California architecture design communities, you are a celebrity, you are well known, you are the man. I don't know, outside of that ecosystem, and I want to talk to you about that too, how many people outside of that know you, but you and I have something in common, and that is that what you do didn't exist prior to you creating that situation. You and I both operate in space in the industry that was not inhabited. It did not exist before we created it. You in particular, you created this brand ambassador geography, this space, this environment for yourself, and what you do for your clients is amazing. And what's interesting too is, even as modern as the industry is today, your position does not exist currently in other markets equal to, you know, the size of LA or maybe a little bit smaller. So with that, and with that buildup, how do you define what you do, and how did you get there to begin with?
So first, thank you for having me on, Josh. It's been a long time coming, and I'm really grateful for this moment. But to answer your question, I can't take full credit for being the architect of it, so to speak. What I can take credit for is my intangible skill set that I'd like to think is sort of genetically brought to me through my mother, and people, places, and things that I've been fortunate enough to be around and absorb and apply. And so, I also have to give a shout out to one of my former employers, Ferguson, who actually put me in the initial position to get the visibility. I took it from there in terms of engaging in the industry. As you know, I was not, from the design sector per se. I have a great sense of design, fashion, style, etc. But I was not a, quote unquote insider. But I was able to gain access. I've tried to trademark this statement or this title. I'd like to call it Insta Rapport is what I have. And trying to just go right in and have always had that magnetism in terms of attracting the right human beings, I would say, and then sort of being able to identify, how to benefit all that I engage and hopefully receive some benefit in return. And so, always have to, celebrate Ferguson for giving me that initial opportunity. Their visibility gave me the credibility that I have today, I'd like to say. And then, like I said, a lot of it from there just becomes your own secret special sauce. I have a lot of people that say, hey, you're sharing too much of this, that, or the other in your consultations. And I go, well, I don't know that the formula is some sort of rocket science situation. But what I do know, in most instances, I go with some of my larger clients, they go, well, how do you do X, Y, and Z? Because the how matters. But I go, well, most of it's proprietary, and without sounding arrogant or, conceited or some other term of that nature, I go, it's largely me. It's my ability, the trust that I have, the respect that I've gained over the last 7-8 years in this industry. As you and I always talk about, I think it's sort of an unwavering commitment to authenticity, and being, really genuine about, the campaigns that I'm going, whether it's just, exploring something or, trying to create content.
I get that. Digging a little bit deeper on that whole concept, though, it's really interesting. Something you mentioned is, it's about you and the authenticity behind it. My background too is not from design and architecture. I come from broadcast. And it's really interesting because in broadcast, there's kind of this unwritten rule where everyone's in a race to come in second. Nobody wants to be the first person to do something. Nobody wants to be the first person to trailblaze and put in the expense and the cost and the effort and the sweat equity to go do something that nobody else is doing. They want someone else to go put in all the work, and then they want to see what they did, come in after, and just kind of copy that and hope it works out for them. And what's really interesting is when I came into the business, I came in eyes wide open, just in this sense of awe and wonder. And I've worked with magazines. I'm still kind of surprised that the majority of the push, if you will, comes from the magazines, because it's not that it's antiquated. We're visual media. We're a visual industry, but when you look at sort of how influence is generated, and let's be honest, we trade in influence. That is the stock in trade. That is what we do. We create, share, manufacture, and promote influence. And when I came into the biz, people would say, so how do you do this? And you got to remember, I was doing a podcast in 2013. Nobody in our industry knew what a podcast was. And I would walk up to designers and say, hey, I would love to have you on my podcast. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's great. Hey, what's a podcast? And by the way, I still have to answer that every now and then. But it's interesting because you were one of the people that I met early on. And I remember a breakfast, you, myself, and Sean Thompson, and we just had this great conversation. And we were talking about, you were explaining sort of how you got into the business, and you come from this fashion background, and how did that define what you do now? And I think it's really important because as we kind of, unpack all this, what you do for brands, like, for example, with Monogram, I want to talk about them a little bit and some of the things that you do, because you're groundbreaking, and that breaking of new ground, new territory, turns it directly into sales, which is kind of like, that is the holy grail for everyone who's in the industry right now, is trying to figure out how to convert influence into sales, right? And you've picked up on some tactics, some ideas, and some strategies over time. In Southern California, at design events, you are a fixture. Everyone knows you. You know everyone, and you've been able to sort of leverage that influence into sales. How do you do that? Where did that start?
Well, I think first was understanding my mission, because as you know, in our industry, I mean, who doesn't love a good party, right? So, my sort of direct speak, if you will, in terms of getting my partners to understand, listen, it's not necessarily about the volume of attendance, it's about identifying the right people, what their purposes are, and then additionally understanding those follow-up components. I think that's what a lot of it is, Josh, is that people sort of overlook or are unaware, is probably a better term, of the key elements of what we do. I think of even being an influencer, brand ambassador, et cetera, is okay. There's all these sort of coined terms, ROI and impressions and all these things. And I go, okay, that's cute. And it makes you sound like you know what you're talking about, where we all know it is very difficult. In fact, I just had a conversation with someone recently about quantifying ROI and how difficult it actually can be. But what my rebut was, listen, I consider exposure ROI. I consider being in relevant places ROI. I consider the opportunity to meet new brands, new developers, new designers who might be unfamiliar with you, and how that product placement can change the perception of who you are. Because, there's a term that, we used to use at another company, and it was preferred. And so, for me, it becomes, really understanding sort of psychologically, how we consume in this market. And I'm talking about the great United States of America, because I've run into potential clients that are from other countries, and I've had to explain to them, hey, that's a great concept that you just gave me, but you're going to have some challenges. I'm not telling them, that they can't succeed, but what I try to explain to them is, look, there's a certain way, and don't get me wrong, I reject absolutisms, Josh. Like anybody that comes to me with absolutely this, I'm like, oh, okay, buddy, hold on here. Like there's no such thing, other than some things that I won't dive into, but and that's the end of our story. That's absolute. The rest of it in between, you never know, so I'm not here to say that you can't, do things different ways. But I think for me, one of the things that I would really attribute my success to is that comprehension through what I do know. One of my old mentors is on the Apple board, Ron McJunkin, and he and I used to work together at another company. And he used to tell me, Charles, success comes from knowing. And he used to say, what do you know? And he actually referenced his time. Well, he was on the Apple board at the time. And he said, we're successful because we know what, so that's why they don't have 1,000 SKUs there. They've got the pad and the phone and a couple other things, and because they know they've built that community. And so, speaking of that, it's also me being aware of that. Okay, I've got this community. I'm getting valuable feedback, which is another thing that I've sort of changed their psychology around, which is understanding, listen, I've found it to be more valuable in identifying what they're not digging per se, or why they aren't doing business with you, to be more valuable than the why they are. It's like, okay, because you can, hopefully just make a pivot and, be on the path of whether it's, signing up for a subscription, services, products, etc. But I've told them, I'm like, hey, that's just as valuable. And I think, again, because of the trust that I've built and the reputation, that people, will come to me and, not trying to be disrespectful, but they'll say, they'll give me the whys, and then I can bring that back. And then they have final right of refusal to say, hey, look, this is within our wheelhouse, or it isn't. And we move forward and say, well, actually, that's not our audience, or identify, what else we can do. So I just think that there's a combination of things. I always tell people it's really like a hybrid sort of situation that I'm in. And I'm very adaptable. Again, just kind of going back to this whole absolutism. I don't go in thinking, well, it's got to go this way and it has to be done. It has to be said. I'm like, well, I'm able to identify, well, that's actually, they are saying the same thing, or that actually is what I'm looking for. It's just, it appears to be different, or it sounds a little different, but in its essence, it's what I'm looking for. So that's kind of, how I've gone about it. And again, I think a big part of it is one, when I go in, I'm going in with an open mind, and my purpose is, navigating to get, what we're looking for, get to that particular goal.
You are listening to my conversation with Charles Miller. We will get right back to that in just a sec. We are living in a time of incredible growth, both technologically and creatively, with respect to interior design, exterior design, and architecture. There is no question. There are companies thinking differently about the business of design and how to make products super serve those for whom they're being made. One of those companies, and one of my favorites, is Moya Living. Designer and fabricators of some of the most stunningly beautiful, incredibly durable, and highly functional kitchen, bath, and outdoor kitchen cabinetry on the market today. Powder-coated steel with stunning lines, vibrant colors to fit any design style or aesthetic. A history of designing cabinetry for the scientific community, so it's been tested in some of the truly the most harsh conditions available. Moya O'Neill is the CEO and founder of Moya Living. She's the inspiration behind the design. Designers, their specification process is so simple. It will make your job so much easier. Check them out online through the socials at Moya Living, their website, moyaliving.com, and in the real world, their live kitchen showroom in Fountain Valley, California. Convo by Design is more than just a podcast. I'm not sure if you know that. I have spent the past 10 years building a production company and consulting firm that develops brand ambassador programs, CEUs, live event programming, as well as branded content for companies in the design and architecture industry, including designers, architects, furnishing companies, showrooms, and others in the trade. We have content producer talent in every region of the country and can help you grow your design business through brand development campaigns, social media, and CEU content development and production, as well as content consulting and live event programming to help you build strong and meaningful partnerships that will help you grow and strengthen your design business. For more information, message me at Convo by Design with an X on Instagram, or email me convobydesign@outlook.com, convobydesign@outlook.com. I want to actually backtrack a little bit on something that you said. You were talking about quantification, right, and attribution and ROI. I think that there are some people in our industry who still don't understand what ROI is or what it means. Quite frankly, return on investment is ROI. And that doesn't mean, like, it's so funny. In my broadcast days, Charles, it was like I would talk to a senior media supervisor and they would say, our ROI against this buy for Ford, Chevy, Home Depot, Coke, whomever is, we need 5 to 1. We need 10 to 1. We need 15 to 1. So in other words, for every dollar they spend, they need to see $15, $10, $8 come back. Okay. Well, the next step in that is, well, what's the attribution? How do you attribute that? Is it goodwill? Is it actual sales? And if it is actual sales, how do you quantify the actual sales that, and it's funny because I've been really looking forward to this conversation with you since we scheduled it. And I'll tell you why. Because, well, I love having design and architecture conversations. I love digging in. I was talking to a designer last week where one of his projects just totally excited me. And I wanted to get into his space and figure, how did you do that? Why that millwork? Why that, why that transom, and how did you put it together? And it was so much fun. I love doing that. But I love doing this. This is the same thing to me as breaking down design. This is breaking down the business of design. And it's really funny because we're in a space right now, and I think you probably know this, post-pandemic, many people, if you go to LinkedIn, have added the word coach to their titles. I'm a business coach. Okay, you're a former designer, and now you're a business coach. Look, if you want to create that space for yourself, knock yourself out. But that to me is tantamount to, the way I see it, as someone who designs their bedroom and then goes out and hangs a shingle and calls themselves an interior designer.
Agreed.
You didn't do the work to
Right.
learn the business. You don't understand why color means what color means and how to figure out what color is really true in what kind of light. There is a skill to what amazing designers and architects actually do.
100%.
And the same kind of practice goes on where someone will just go, okay, well, now post-pandemic, I don't have any design work. So now I'm a design coach and I'm going to tell you how to, and you know what? Do your thing. But at the end of the day, there is a science to ROI and attribution of return on investment and quantification and qualification. Like, you can remember the days of doing just big parties where it's like you just order a bunch of liquor and a bunch of food and send out a blast to everyone you know on your database, and you'll bring them to a showroom and it was a success, right? That's not how it works anymore.
Right.
Knowing that, one of the things that you do exceptionally well is, and I've been on the other side of this, so I've had a chance to see it, and I want to know where this comes from. The manner in which you break down quantifying and the manner in which you deconstruct a return on investment and the manner in which you map out, attribution. Specifically, I think it's really important specifically to define it for the architecture and design community and what you do for your clients. It's not enough just to reach someone on Instagram. It's how you reach them on Instagram. It's not enough to do an event for designers and architects. It's the conversations that you're having at those events. Where did that start? And how do you break that down? How do you define it? How do you structure it for your clients who at the end of the day are like, I just have to turn this into sales?
Well, so first and foremost, I've sort of changed how I describe it. So the primary term that I use that is most appropriate is campaign, because when you think about a campaign, you think about, hopefully true engagement, where you sort of are able to share what your intention is, what you can do for your audience and what they can expect from you, and also try to identify what they need, and so I think that, when you approach it that way, people are more open. And then in terms of my client, I get them to understand, listen, I say, there are numerous occasions where you'll go, wow, Charles, that was magical. And I'll go, agreed. But I tell them I'm no magician. I say there are no tricks up my sleeve. I'm not an illusionist. It's like what you see is real. And there's, to your point, a lot of work that goes into it. There is, it is a science, and it's, again, looking for, we used to call them customer cues, or the right, I'm a big reader in body language, which you have to be in any level of, big time sales, which I consider marketing to just be the ultimate level of sales, because it's selling the mind, selling, the way you think, and really ultimately can persuade you for life, to believe in something. And so for me, it's really just having that understanding, making sure that I'm really clear in conveying the journey that's ahead. Again, I don't, go out and say, in fact, I had a client that I said, look, if I could turn your business around in a year, I should be billing you, millions, not what I actually charge. I said, because that would make me, almost an imbecile if I had that capability. And I said, even on Madison Avenue, they're not just, clients aren't coming in and they're saying, hey, in a year, and they've got data that far exceeds mine. I mean, they've probably got Google level data there, but I'm sure they're still not, making those types of statements. So it's understanding, listen, for me, the brands that I'm aligned with, like Monogram, like Kohler, I believe in who they are as brands, what they stand for, and then the journey that they're going on. And so for me, that's equally important. And then again, within that, like a Kohler, for example, who has an incredible marketing strategy. And I'm talking global. We were in China in 2018. And I mean, there's Kohler ads there and Kohler billboards. And again, they're at Salone and Art Basel and some of the really chic platforms. They're there. They've identified that. Where I have helped them is understanding some of the narrative that they're a very humble company, ironically, that does things like shower the homeless and different things that I told them, hey, that shouldn't be a secret, like that should be something that people are aware of. And so I help them again, I help identify things that I think would resonate with our community, with humanity at large, and I feel like that's what real branding is today, is people need to see elements of themselves in your brand, because that's the Gen Zer is, my son, they're coming up quicker than the millennial did. Like they're that statement on the side view and rear view where it says objects in the mirror are closer than they appear. And they're demanding it today. They're like, hey, listen, why can't we get this, get the conservation together? Why can't we, use solar power? Why are we in a desert and everybody wants a green lawn? It's like, it doesn't make sense. We should adapt to the environment versus, some of all these bygone, antiquated things that are, not making the world a better place, honestly. So anyway, I try to incorporate a lot of those psychologies. Like I read someone the other day that I follow on IG, and it said all great marketing folks are in essence philosopers. And I've always considered myself to be, a philosopher. And so I think that, again, it's kind of right in my wheelhouse. And I've just had a uncanny knack of fusing that. Because again, I kind of tell people, I say, for me, it's about lifestyle fusion. So it's, the person in the, buying the Truesdale estate home is going to, typically have this type of vehicle, have these types of interests, and then trying to find a way to reflect that we understand that, makes them say, hey, you know what, you do get me. And then that's where relationships are born, because I look at it more like not a purchase, not a transaction, but a relationship.
I think you're spot on. And because of that, you're able to get the kind of information that is of value to the clients. And what's really interesting about that is, you talk about it in terms of philosophy and being a philosopher. I have always qualified it as being a futurist, because, there's not any real science to that. I mean, there can be for sure, but it's not about the science of it. It's about looking at where we are and predicting what we're going to need in the future, how we're going to live with what and where in the future. That's one of the reasons why right after the pandemic started, I started Designing for Disaster, which was this series where, when we're locked at home, just a month or two after the pandemic started, I'm talking to designers and architects from across the country and around the world, saying, what are you seeing? How are you dealing with this? And it was eye-opening how everyone was both similar and completely different in the manner in which that they did what they do. To your point, predictability and using the predictive nature of qualifying and quantifying an audience. What kind of qualities are they going to have? Are they, are people who buy a Monogram appliance also, do they have an affinity for a BMW? Do they, it's an interesting idea. people who buy certain brands. And by the way, there is a science to that. My background in broadcast, we had all of these resources. It was amazing. All of the data that I had access to saying, if someone is the qualitative information, like here's the quantitative, here's how in a certain region, the Los Angeles DMA or TSA, total survey area, and within the LATSA, what is the amount of residents who, as a family, earn over $400,000 and live in these 25 zip codes and buy a BMW or they buy a Monogram appliance? Now you're starting to really drill down and get science for what people buy and how they buy it and how they use it. In our industry, it's surprising to me, but there is none of that. And there is none of that. By the way, it exists, but nobody is subscribing to the services that they provide it because it's very expensive information. And the magazines don't buy that information. They'll buy they'll buy competitive information to say, well, if this brand is advertising in this magazine, they could be advertising in ours as well. So they'll send a seller to go sell against them. But that doesn't tell you what the audience is necessarily doing. And I think that you and I, and you've filled a void helping brands, in this, we use Monogram and Kohler as examples, but you filled a void helping them on a granular level. You're not necessarily talking about the New York City metro area. You're talking about Southern California and specifically what Angelinos want. And there's a huge value to that because one of the numbers, one of the metrics that I've always kept is what's called retail spending power. And the retail spending power is how much do those people spend? And if you break down that number, like I do for clients as well, it's astronomical. And if you can figure out how to tap into that person.
Right.
So that being said, how do you approach a couple of things, specifically the advertising, the social media, the events? Because I think, like we covered a little bit, there's value in all of those things.
Sure.
But it's limited by its capabilities of delivering, back to the attribution and the return on investment. When you're looking at specific elements that contribute to every campaign, how do you evaluate? How do you measure one opportunity against another? What do you look for? Is it specifics that you're looking for? Is it specific designers that you're looking for based on who hires them? What are you looking for?
Yeah, so it's fluid, if I'm being honest, again, which is advantageous to me. I mean, for me, what I've found is, you look at from the pandemic, a lot of the massive companies did not survive that because they're not agile. They're like, they've set their strategy, 5 years before. And so it's kind of like that Titanic scenario where it's, you think it's unsinkable, but it doesn't have the agility, even though you can see, and that may be a little bit of an unfair statement because none of us foresaw what we went through. But what I've found to be astonishing as I drive around our fabulous city here in Los Angeles and how vast and diverse it is, the companies that have survived and endured versus the ones that haven't. And in a lot of respects, it's the smaller, more nimble, flexible, the ones that were willing to adapt and change the way they did business, slightly, are the ones that are, still. And I mean, we were in the mall doing some holiday shopping recently. And I said, I'm not going to say the company, but I was like, holy smokes, man. I remember when they were like, people were like, they're goners, and they're thriving. And I was like, go figure, and I was like, and then there was some noticeably vacant, sort of anchor stores that were not there. And I was just like, holy smokes. And therein lies, why I reject the absolutism thing, because I'm like, you would think all the metrics tell you this company has all the money and blah, 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 blah. But what they didn't have is what was necessary through what we all endured. So for me, I go in first and foremost, if I'm doing it from a consultation standpoint, I need to find out what you're looking for, what your goal is. And then I can tell you, from my, experience, hey, listen, on the right track, or make recommendations or suggestions saying, listen, I beg to differ. And then you make a decision, and I can go either down reluctantly and say, don't blame it on me, or, kind of hopefully have a happy medium somewhere along the line. But in terms of, the various elements that you reference, so whether it's social, sort of your conventional marketing, et cetera, those are actually all different jobs, like literally I saw something, some people were kind of having a little beef on Twitter this morning, and this guy referenced this gal and says, hey, don't you have a job? Like, all I see are tweets. And so the person below defended the gal and said, tweeting is a job, it's sharing information. And, there is an ecosystem there today, whether people choose to acknowledge it or not. And so what I really try to convey is, contractually, I will kind of have a hard floor, like, okay, this is I will do X amount of stories, X amount of posts, but I want to have the liberty to, again, be organic. There's some brands that, they want what they want, and that's it. And then there's others where I have a blank canvas, which I kind of do much better there than sort of being, hey, do this or that or the other. But those are actually, you could be on social all day. Like, that is a job. There are people making money just doing that. So to come in with a cocktail, so to speak, or a soup, of ingredients, is, there's a lot going on there. So for me, it's just kind of going in, trying to see what the landscape looks like, understanding the elements of that. So for modernism, for example, I'm fairly aware of who I can anticipate seeing there. And so I may do some outreach beforehand, because we're going to do a cocktail soiree. So again, for me now, the play is, how can I amplify brand, which is always first and foremost for me. And then secondly, what are the elements of that? So it becomes, okay, right people, at the right thing. And then again, understanding, are they engaging, because there are designers out there that are really sort of introverted, and I don't know if aloof is the right term, but although they may have this great brand name, they're not going to do much for you in terms of telling your story with enthusiasm, because again, I believe that that's contagious. If I've made a great impression with you, and I know from your experience, that's part of the game. Okay. I remember before we had all these, statistics at the level we have it today, there was one that I was really aware of back when I sold fine jewelry. And it was something like the person that has the great experience, for whatever reason, doesn't share it as rapidly as the person who has a contrary experience that doesn't go so well. And so, as we evolved into this era, I remember being at another company, and I told them, who you need to be wary of? Yelp. I said, because people are pre-shopping you now. And I said, if you think about it logically, why would someone, come to your place of business if they've read a review that was negative? Like, that's all, that's that's nonsensical. I'm like, whereas if I have a counter one that says, everything was great here, treated me with respect, valued my time, dealt with things with urgency, et cetera. So it just depends. I don't go in unless I'm familiar with the environment, and even then things can change on a dime. So I'm constantly, again, just sort of evaluating, assessing, and then I've kind of gotten to a point now, I think, because of my reputation and the lore I have. Even I think most people understand, listen, if Charles is there, it's going to be sort of a fertile ecosystem, whereas, all that are there will be opportunities. And I think there's value in that. Who wouldn't want to be in an environment where, hey, listen, once I get inside there, it's up to me. I mean, I've kind of been wired that way. Look, I don't need you to give me anything, but I should, if you can hold that door open so I like my chances, once I get inside, and so I think that's another thing that has become synonymous with Charles in Charge, and the way I operate. And so, I'll just give a shout out to my friend Aaron V, who recently called and said, hey, you're going to be down in modernism, and we're aligned with her Monogram on a couple of extraordinary projects. And so there's synergy there, and so again, I just thought to myself, like, when you talk about affirmations of where one has maybe ascended to, I was at a party recently and somebody said, Charles, look how far you've come, like in 4 years. And I was like, I kind of have made a little progress here. I really don't take time to sort of stop and look at it that way, because, I feel I still have miles to go before I sleep, as that statement goes. But yeah, and I had a publisher or an editor in chief or someone call me as well and bring me some opportunities. And I said, that's again, affirmation of, I think I'm doing the right things the right way, because where other people are seeking a lot of this, Josh, I'm starting to have things brought to me that typically are pay to play opportunities. And I think, taking our conversation around ROI full circle, there's people understanding that it's always not, okay, I saw this go into my piggy bank. It's like, no, ROI also is, the equity that I have to a point where now opportunities that I have sought after are being brought to this guy, and then even if it's not our jam, as the kids say today, having first right of refusal is, that's the position you want to be in. You want to be, first up, and then it's two things that accomplish there. One, I know what's going to be activated. Two, if it's, contrary to your philosophy or sort of campaign or approach, we can come up with a counter or alternate universe, if you will, in which I find to be, pretty cool.
So a couple of things, again, to unpack here, it's really interesting because, you mentioned Erin V, and I love Erin. She actually was a designer on a design house project that I was producing, my first actually back in 2010. And she's a remarkable talent. And It's interesting to see what some of these creatives are able to do with their influence and how they, it's not about, a lot of these designers have clients whose homes you'll never see because they've got NDAs and you don't publish them. They're uber famous and super rich, and they don't want people looking in their house. And so designers have to figure out, how else do I do this without sharing too much? And then you get into the sharing of information, and then people kind of bastardize your ideas. It's kind of sad to me. I had a publicist call me the other day about wanting to book someone for the show. And she said, we're just curious though, because we're not sure that we can afford it. And I was like, I'm not following you. And because now, again, when I was doing this in 2013, there were no podcasts out there. So, I'm calling people saying, hey, come on the show. But since then, there's quite a few design podcasts out there, and they charge their guests. They don't say that. It's the same way that a magazine will have something and it will, it'll read promotional or advertorial, in which case, that it was a pay to play kind of gig. But I don't charge for my editorial. I've never charged for my editorial. I have never charged someone a fee to be on Convo by Design, because I do this because I love it, because I want to talk to people. And it's kind of like the same with you, the manner in which you organize your campaigns, your opportunities, your engagement with your clients. I think I've always admired that. Because you've got great ideas, but what you've also got is a structure by which you work with your clients. So, scatter shooting a little bit and closing this out. I can't believe we've been at this almost an hour. I'm curious, your position, your opinion, your take on a couple of things. Social media and how not necessarily designers or creatives use it, but how brands are using it most effectively now.
Some do it better than others. I think some really get it. Because what I have concluded, and it's still ongoing, is that there is no real rhyme or reason. I mean, there's all sorts of people out there that'll give you tips on how to grow, how to, attract and get the impressions. And they're saying, there's certain things that reference, real engagement and things that don't. But what I found, with the growth of TikTok, even where you think it's just a silly little goofy dances, where I have discovered in the last year that it is so much information on there and they can cut right to the chase, versus, some of these other places where it takes you, so much time to get these things. So I think it's in a lot of instances, understanding not to take yourself too seriously. I think it's more about, a big part of my philosophy is frequency. I think frequency matters. And I think that's part of the algorithm. I've even slowed down because it is draining, to be on there and, trying to put something, quote unquote, cool on there every day. But I think that what I tell my clients is it's a necessity. Like you can't just not be there, the people that, because there's still I'd say in the 30 percentile, a third of, the market is still like, oh, I don't do that. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like you can't just ignore it, even if you're posting once a week or something, you've got to be, because what I have found is, I've attended all, real estate events, all different types, mostly design centric. But, when you look at the mechanisms that people are utilizing to identify who you are, now it's, it might be LinkedIn first, then it's IG. Then it's like, I asked this guy, he was a younger guy, but I said, he came over and paid me a compliment on my fit. And then I said, oh man, let me get your number. And he goes, oh, it was almost like he was like body language. He was like, hey, what's your LinkedIn? Like, yeah, we don't do numbers, and I just found that to be really interesting because he didn't say that, but his body language said it. And he didn't give me his phone number. So I just thought, okay, that's a generational thing. But it's, again, understanding, how things operate today. Like I had someone send me a post for a digital card the other day. And I said, oh, I'm aware of those, but I'll stick with the conventional. I said, there's something about feeling something. And I get so many responses when I do hand them out. And I said, frankly, when you're in sort of that speed dating environment, if you will, that you're navigating through and you're trying, oh, there's Josh Cooperman. I want to go over and introduce myself for Convo by Design, or, this is Charles from Monogram or Kohler. A lot of times by the end of the night, without that card, it can be difficult to follow up. And I'm always thinking about follow up, and again, that's another element that I tell people that they get from me is I say, you've done all the right things, but where's your follow-up component? I'm boots on the ground. I'm the guy that can come back and say, hey, you know what, how are things are going, and that sort of thing, which I think is really valuable.
Totally agree. And I totally appreciate the time today. This was so much fun and so long overdue. Charles, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, Josh.
Design Hardware's newly remodeled showroom is where you will find a gallery-style space with a thoughtful display of products, purposefully positioned to allow unbridled exploration and discovery. High-end faucets, luxury tile, natural stone, wood floors, and bespoke hardware selections are presented in a holistic manner, strategically arranged to stimulate creativity and transition your vision from the conceptual stage to a fully realized space. Conveniently located, free parking available. Stop by to find your inspiration. Collect samples, get expert advice, and tackle everything on your shopping list all in one place. Visit them online at designhardware.com or in the real world world. 6053 West 3rd Street in Los Angeles. Charles, thank you. I appreciate you, buddy. Well done. You are one of the best at what you do, and I appreciate it. Thank you to Convo by Design partners and sponsors, including Thermosol, Moya Living, Design Hardware. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to download, subscribe, and listen to the show. I appreciate you, and I hope this show helps you do that thing you do better. For more information about the show, about what we do here at Convo by Design, check the show notes for links and ways to connect. Until next week, be well and take today first.